Well, here we have a slide cast of an overview of all the major leaders of the Soviet Union, their major policies that they did and that we should know about, and their successes and failures. So here's the USSR, the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic, and Russian leadership from 1918 to present. Of course, the first person that we have is Lenin. Lenin is the founder and the creator of the Soviet Union, one of the driving forces of the Bolsheviks and behind the Russian Revolution. After he wins the Battle of the Reds over the Whites, he goes to work on his new economic policy. It is to change the economic system into the communism, and as you can see, was fairly successful in creating an economy that was devastated by war and corruption of the Tsar and such. So his output surpassed with industry, which is a hallmark of the Soviet Union, is the creation of industry. But of course, Stalin's leadership is cut short early on in the Soviet Union because of a stroke, and the resulting battle is Stalin versus Trotsky. And as we know from Stalin, he is a backstabber, literally, and Trotsky is defeated by Stalin and his henchmen. And in fact, there is even a story, whether it's true or not, it makes for a good story, that Lenin said, "Don't let Stalin lead, he is too cruel." Stalin is 23 to 53, so his 30-year reign as the premier of the Soviet Union. He has his economic plans are not the NEP, they call them the 5-year plans. And basically, Stalin is so feared that people work so hard, he says, this is the numbers you must get for our 5-year plans, and people report to him that they met or succeeded those things, even though they did not. They were too high to start with, and he couldn't succeed to create them, and it was just an economic disaster. People literally starved in the fields they were growing grain, and because the food was sent to other places in the Soviet Union. So spectacular failures for his 5-year year plan, both the first 5-year plan and the second 5-year plan. The wealthy peasants, called kulaks, also suffered here, and so the economic feeding system of the 5-year plan is a failure. Industrialization does go faster. He does create lots of things. That actually gets help from people in the West in some cases. Independent people, capitalists, independent ventures go out there and help him build the cement and the steel and things that he needs. And he does have some success with the industrialization. Life in the Soviet Union under Stalin is very stagnant, very oppressive. There is not real consumer goods. It is very difficult to live and survive. There's no real advancement in any of the social programs that you might think of a government would provide. Basically, Stalin is there to continue to hold things, to deify himself, and to create an oppressive environment. Education is a little bit developed with skill in workers, and as you can see, incentives to skilled workers and managers, but education is hard to come by without connection to the elite group. One thing we should give Joseph Stalin for is women in the workplace. Women had been in the military in World War II, and women have high positions in much of the government. There is a glass ceiling that they can't break through, but women do get a lot more equality a lot sooner in the Soviet Union than they do in other places, even though they are still oppressed, as the men are as well. You can see the glorification of Stalin. Some people call it the cult of Stalin. His face is everywhere. His name is everywhere. It is what he does to get himself to almost a deity of things. And continues to see the great purges. We know about the purges that happened in the 30s that brought about the problems in the military in World War II. But Stalin had, as you can see, 8 million people arrested and executed. So the death toll for Stalin's 30-year reign is actually higher than that of Hitler, even though it's spread out over 30 years. Stalin, very oppressive. After the war comes Nikita Khrushchev. He is a reformer. He actually gives a speech to the Soviet Union, the party elite, talking about de-Stalinization, that Stalin was in fact a horrible person and he did horrible things. and he's going to lighten up with what goes on, denounce Stalin and what he did, liberalize things, increase consumer goods and agriculture, and he wanted to look at a peaceful coexistence with the West. So getting away completely from Lenin's global communism. However, with the relaxing tensions, we can see that, and we know about the oppression in Hungary and other places. And we know Khrushchev's connection with the kitchen debate with Nixon, famous for telling the people of America that America is communism will surpass America. And the clip from my favorite part of that is we'll wave goodbye in 7 years. They'll pass the United States, which of course they don't do. Then the Cuban Missile Crisis is Khrushchev's biggest downfall. He underestimates Kennedy, underestimates what Kennedy will do. The blockade comes. The missiles are removed from Turkey. The missiles are removed from Cuba. And combined with a bad harvest for 2 years makes Khrushchev have to retire, quote unquote, as the Soviet Unions remove him. Then come Brezhnev, the man with the biggest eyebrows in the history of the Soviet Union. He brings us back a little more. It's what's called a hardliner. He re-Stalinizes, focusing on the good points of what Stalin did, military focus, the deity of the state above all else, and he is the one that cracks down on Alexander Dubček in Czechoslovakia with the Prague Spring, and he comes up with what will be known historically as the Brezhnev Doctrine, which is the right for the Soviet Union to intervene in any communist or Soviet state, not unlike America and their Western powers and the NATO alliance. Toward the end of his career, he invaded Afghanistan, which is his contemporary issue, is really interesting because the Soviet Union was not able to win the war in Afghanistan. And with that invasion comes the boycott of the U.S. Olympic Games and the Western denouncing of the Soviet Union and invading part of Central Asia. They withdraw about 3 or 4 years later because they're not able to defeat the people in Afghanistan. And of course, the side note is one of the things that U.S. does is provide aid to those fighting the Soviet Union, which will grow into some of the leadership of the Taliban, and some people would even say Osama bin Laden. Reagan comes to power in 1980 with Brezhnev at the helm, and in a famous speech calls Brezhnev's Soviet Union the evil empire and ratchets up the missile program, and away we go with more and more missiles. Then come what we collectively call the cardiac kids. Konstantin Chernenko and Yuri Andropov are two people that are not really around long enough to do anything major. They both die of health ailments, and when I was alive at that point, you always wondered what's going on in the Soviet Union. Is there a whole bunch of fighting? Are they killing these people? What's going on? But most people would say they just died of old age, as they are all products of the World War II leadership. So you have Yuri Andropov and Konstantin Chernenko. That brings us to our last leader of the Soviet Union. We've heard much about him, Mikhail Gorbachev, who is the leader from 1985, will actually be called president in the last 2 years. He's there before it dissolves completely into what is called the CIS, or the Commonwealth of Independent States. He is an agricultural minister, sees the result that there's no way the Soviet Union will be able to feed his country, is working as agricultural minister. So he works on basically a 3-point platform: an economic restructuring called perestroika with limited private enterprise, a philosophical change in how the Soviet Union views conversations and press and ideas called glasnost, and democratization from the ground up to have elections, truly elections with one party, communist elections, not unlike a little bit of the Prague Spring and how to do that. He did not see the Soviet system to be dissolved, he saw it to be reformed. But with the openness and the discussions, there is 2 factions. The liberals want more, faster reformers, and the hardliners, the conservative socialists, want to replace him because they believe he's destroying the system, the Stalinistic type system. So Gorbachev gets caught between the left and the right tries to get him kicked out in August 1991. He is on vacation, quote unquote, and is imprisoned in a vacation home for 3 days. He is then brought back, but he will never have the strength and power any longer after that. With the continuing left rise, the president of Russia, one of the pieces of the Soviet Union, his name is Boris Yeltsin. He's elected president in '91. He helped save Gorbachev in the coup, and then moves forward to more reform with the weakness of Gorbachev and declares Russia independent from the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union as a whole will dissolve, like I said, into the Commonwealth of Independent States, with Russia being the major factor of the CIS. His economic reforms were considered gangster capitalism, not unlike Putin, where you have your cronies that have the chance to build or have access or get the money supply, get the raw materials, and make reforms. However, with reform, he was reelected to a second term in '96. Boris Yeltsin's reforms came fairly quickly. However, again, the older generation was concerned because with capitalism comes competition and price gouging and price rises, and some people thought that they were better off under the old system. And then comes our nationalist, Vladimir Putin, who was president from 2000 to 2008, consolidated power. He rises to power with the idea of I'm going to combat corruption and terrorism. A little bit of the terrorism that now faces America since 2001 faced Russia in an area called Chechnya, and he was going to keep the Russian people safe. He was going to expand the economy, reestablish as a world power of Russia, use the fact that they have missiles to reassert Russia as a power. And the question at the bottom there, is he a Democrat or is he an autocrat? Well, from 2000 to 2008, he did push really hard for economic reform, but more millionaires were created in Russia than ever before. But he was given, specific people were given access to the coal mines, steel mines, and different areas. They're called Russian oligarchs, as they created huge amounts of wealth, but all with the permission and some people would say kickback to Putin. So there was lots of corruption. In fact, in 2008, because the Russian constitution says you cannot be elected for more than 2 terms in a row, he consolidated some power, handed it off to a secondary post, then ran for that post, handed off the presidency with less power for 4 years to a guy named Medvedev, and then transferred the powers back and ran for president again in 2012, and he can spend another 2 terms as president of Russia. Outside of our course, he invades Georgia, and the United States and NATO does nothing, takes over Georgia, and now most recently we have the Crimea takeover with very little or if anything done other than words by the West, and the continuing conflict in eastern Ukraine.